Introduction to who am I? Why am I sitting here talking to you? I'm Chief Executive of Valufin, which is a company that manages foreign exchange risk for companies primarily based in the UK and globally, with the exception of primarily the South African market, which is addressed through company Constançon currencies. So both UK-based organizations servicing different markets because of different regulatory requirements. What we're going to be doing today, just getting my facts into gear, making sure which chameleon am I today? I'm a foreign exchange chameleon today. I'm going to be covering the pitfalls in the foreign exchange risk management area. I'm going to be talking about various tips and solutions, but I'm going to be doing it from quite a high level. And then I'm going to be giving you some clues and ideas of how you can take ownership and control of your foreign exchange risk management processes, so that a lot of companies think, well, I don't bother about foreign exchange because there's nothing I can do about it. If I can achieve one thing by the end of today is to realize that you actually can do something about it. And it's important that you do take ownership and management of what you can do about the foreign exchange risks. So what has been my experience? What have I done with my career to get me to the position I am now, standing in front of you guys? Actually, I'm sitting. Slightly different environment now, not a formal presentation. I used to originally be the treasurer of Blue Circle, the cement company, and heavy engineering company. And I always thought my bank was able to help me with my questions. I used to get quite frustrated because they didn't always, but I assumed it was up to the individual as to why I wasn't getting the information I needed. I then moved and went dark side and went to work for a bank, worked for Société Générale, which at the time was a joint venture with Sanlam in South Africa, and managed their foreign exchange risk and put them into effectively became the youngest chief dealer in South Africa, only female chief dealer, I think, at the time. I don't know if there have been any since, but a whole lot of barriers that I had to deal with. One, because I was a woman, one, because I was English in an Afrikaans environment, and one because I wasn't a banker. So it was a whole bunch of challenges that we dealt with in those days. But what I did realize very quickly is that I was unable to look after the customer. So I suddenly understood why I was frustrated as an individual working on at the corporate side. And here I was on the bank side, and I was still, even though I understood my customers' roles and what they were doing, I couldn't actually do it. And the reason I couldn't do it is people are multi-banked. They don't have the information. There's limited ability to share it. Invariably, the customer themselves don't know what they want, don't know what they need, don't know what their challenges are. So you're sitting in a position that unknown that's sitting as a barrier prevents an organization who they bank with to be independent enough to actually be able to offer the right kind of advice. The other kind of issue is most people who are on the dark side at the bank, the broker, wherever they are, have actually never operated within a business environment. Now, having not operated in a business environment, don't know the right questions to ask, don't know what information should be recorded. So I could see where the problem was. And in 1988, that took me, with my frustrations, in an effort to deal with them, started my own business. Now, that was in the days that consultancy in foreign exchange didn't exist. And I have to say I'm amazed when I came to the UK from South Africa that in the early 2020s or 2000s, early 2000s, equally, that market still had not matured in the UK market, which was a major surprise to me. So built the business around servicing up to probably 200-300 South African corporates, ultimately took the company to market, sold it, and then had a fairly substantial restraint of trade, preventing me from competing in that market. And in the meantime, I'd come to the UK, got involved in the governance world, and the foreign exchange bug had bitten me for life, and I'm stuck with it. And here I am again, back in the foreign exchange world. And now, thanks to the changes in regulation, changes in technology, changes in the market that I'm in, we've been able to actually re-engineer what we were offering back in the 80s and the 90s into a seriously new technology-driven environment and a more modern environment that we're operating in today. But interestingly enough, the UK market now, which I see we have a good number of people from the UK environment, uh, has not matured as much as South Africa's market did. And the primary reason for that is South Africa's lived in a high interest rate environment forever. It's at the lowest interest rate ever at the moment at 3.5%. The UK is much used to lower interest rates, their highs being more 5% in the recent decades. I know it has been higher before that. So the South African market has become a lot more mature in terms of corporate management of foreign exchange risk than generally you are finding in the UK. So once again, we are in an environment of education as well as service provision. But what I want to talk about today is what can you as companies, whether you are large and you have a treasury operation, whether in most cases you're going to be a mid to large, small, medium to large company that cannot afford a treasury manager as a specific single purpose employee because of the cost, your size, and the demands are just not there within your business. But yet foreign exchange is just a critical aspect of the business. And therefore, I want to help you understand that as an FD, as a financial controller, as a board director, as the chief executive, as somebody who's involved in the sales and purchasing side of the business, somebody who's involved in the shipping side of the business, or the creditors or debtors, everywhere in the business foreign exchange touches, that you actually can do something about managing this unmanageable space, which is the largest liquid market in the world. And no, you can't control it, but you can control what it does to you. And this is where I would like to enlighten people as much as I can today. So the first thing that you need to look at as a organization is how do you minimize your risk? How do you understand what foreign exchange does to your company? Aligning accounting processes. It all sounds boring, but I just want to set the sort of framework at which you need to consider, because these are the things that are impacting the company. So what it needs to happen, this is what we do as an independent, is we sit between the customer and the currency provider, and we join the dots. So we provide the services that the customer wants, in other words, informed treasury management, and we then interact with the currency provider on behalf of the customer, saving them the time, effort, and providing expertise, negotiation, what is required. But the most important is we're independent. We are not a currency provider ourselves. But the important part is if you are going to be managing your foreign exchange, all the things I'm talking about, you can take in-house and you can do yourself. You do not have to go to a currency provider or to an independent like ourselves to be able to take ownership of your foreign exchange risks. So this is a process of sharing what you can do for yourself. Obviously, when we get to question time, I'll answer any questions as to how we can potentially help. It's important that you align the strategy of the company, the purpose of the company, the foreign exchange policy of the company, the accounting policy and procedures and standards of the company, international accounting standards themselves, incentive schemes, the way you operate in terms of sales cycles, purchase cycles, business cycles. All of these things need to be aligned, because otherwise foreign exchange has got this nasty habit of turning things that were unknowns into losses. It seems to have an uncanny magnetism to the loss side of the equation, not the profit side. The number of companies I've worked with who say, no, I don't need to manage my foreign exchange because it's always a profit. But if it's always a profit, it can always be a loss as well, unless you know why and how that is occurring and you have ownership of that result that's coming through the income statement. And just interesting enough, a lot of companies don't have a knowledge of how those numbers are getting in reality to the income statement. They know in principle, but they can't work out the individual steps as to how those numbers are materializing. And that is a very important aspect of the management information, is to get ownership of how your accounting system is working. So independent advice, as we know in all aspects of business, if you're looking at an IT project, you're not going to get advice from the potential provider that you're going to be using. You will go and get independent expertise. If you're needing legal expertise, you're going to go to somebody independent to give you legal expertise, because otherwise people talk their shop. So That is the important aspect to understand in terms of where you turn for foreign exchange support. Uh, where do foreign exchange risks arise? So let's just look at the business. This is small, medium, large. I don't mind what size your business is. You're trading internationally. Goods or services are crossing your border. And as a result, you are getting a foreign exchange element of risk unless you are able to always invoice in home currency. That sometimes is not always the best thing to do. It sometimes is an expensive choice or a non-competitive choice. So don't choose that because you think it's the least risky. It might be the worst business decision. Foreign exchange has a horrible habit of having a business element to it and an accounting element to it. And like two deer that are rutting for territory or whatever they're doing out in the African bush, they never seem to be able to gel these things. They're always at loggerheads with one another. And the important part for the finance people and the owners of businesses and purchasing and sales managers who are trying to generate business is to understand where that clash is occurring and how to manage them as best as possible. So things that we will always look at are things like the accounting policy, companies' risk appetite. Now, if you look at risk appetite is one currency pair, constant flow every month, same kind of volumes. It's not material in the business if the numbers do have a clash. That kind of a beginning framework from what a company looks like. And you compare it to another organization that has 10 currency or countries that they're trading with, 10 currencies that they're having to concern themselves with. They are accounting in a different currency to the one that they are living in. So, for example, a UK-based company is actually accounting in dollars or euros. We've got examples of those that we work with. The seasonal flow of the various products that they're selling are not common. So they've got highs and lows of different currencies at different times of the year. And they have frequent underlying changes to the flow of goods and services that are occurring relative to the budget they planned on. Those two companies need to manage their foreign exchange in very different ways. And therefore, the risk appetite is going to be different for those two companies as well. But as is it at management level, based on the amount of knowledge the company might have in its management team on currency management, and equally at board level, and then specifically at either an audit committee or risk committee, depending on the size of the company, as to whether you have that, or whether you just have a treasury subgroup to your management team. And where is the knowledge? How much of that knowledge do you have? How much do you have in terms of management information that give you comfort to be able to manage this properly? I talked about accounting policies at the beginning, and then you've also got your foreign exchange policy. Those are static documents. They have a dangerous aspect to them, the fact that they are static documents. They provide an umbrella of protection, and comfort, but actually a lot of that is false because you've actually got no idea really the detail of how it is really working. A number of companies I go in and review and have a look at their accounting policy, have a look at their foreign exchange policy, have a look at their risk appetite policy, for example, have a look at their processes, the way they run things in the accounts department and in the sales and purchasing department, and everything is doing its own thing. The fact that there's a policy there is not a comfort for the risk committee, audit committee, or board. It is a beginning point as a frame of reference, but in itself, it is not a comfort blanket. It doesn't provide the protection. It's not an insurance policy. Other things that impact companies, and this is where things become realized versus unrealized, when you put a stake in the sand at the end of a month or at the end of a financial year, that latter one being particularly one that does have a reference point as to what is in the income statement and what is in the balance sheet and how that impacts the accounting outcome, the financials and financial statements of an organization. Another area is the risk appetite, knowledge, and aptitude of your auditors and how they handle and demand you handle your foreign exchange accounting. Incentive schemes can also throw a huge skew onto the foreign exchange activities of a business. Some of them, unfortunately, having a component part that is directly or indirectly related to the exchange rate and has invariably, therefore, unexpected outcomes that you'd rather not have to deal with. The other thing that we see a lot of is the sales cycles that I've been talking about, seasons, whether they are perishable, and sorts of challenges some customers might have is the urgency of getting something done now. And we have an example of a customer who had short shoes sitting on a quayside in China, not being able to load a ship. Examples of a customer who has fresh fruit sitting on a quayside elsewhere in the world. And you're saying this foreign exchange aspect is so critical to the business and to the customer service that you are delivering and to the product even being able to be sold on is or bought, whichever it might be, wherever the risk and reward is sitting. So foreign exchange is so central and so key. It's like the bullseye in the middle of a business, and the tentacles go into every aspect of the company, which is something not well understood by a lot of management. So if we have a look at foreign exchange, when does it come? When does it start to worry us, and when does it end? So if we start with the business itself, the budget, the purpose, the blue skies thinking, the strategy, the new markets that you're looking at, whether it's a supply part of the chain or whether it's the customer end of the chain, you've got that whole continuum. And so we start at strategy day. We then go into budget processes, foreign exchange impacts it there, and then we get into actually doing business, buying or selling your services or products. And at that point in time, normally there's some form of an ordering system that starts to record the information that the orders exist. At this point, nothing sits in the risk register, nothing sits in the accounting system. It is something known and documented in a side part of the organization. Sometimes these systems are linked, sometimes they are not. You then have the order lead time. So it's foreign manufacturer if you were an importer, local manufacturer if you're an exporter. So from the order being placed with you, placing your order offshore, getting through the manufacturer, you then get to it leaving its point of creation and now heads off into the supply chain to arrive at its destination. That has a period of time attached to it. It gets into store, yours or your customers, and then there are credit terms that you have to apply or that you have to pay against. So that lead time can be anything from 2-3 days to anything up to 6 to 9 to 12 months. I have worked with customers in the satellite industry, for example, where this supply chain was 15 years. So it just honestly depends on the business, and you cannot treat Forex with one brush matches everybody for all the reasons I've just alluded to. The external sources that impact the company, we've just covered those internal drivers of foreign exchange risk. You have the external drivers, which is the ones that people recognize first, the spot rate, the one in the graph. That's the one that people seem to hone in on. And as you're understanding from this exercise, I've got lots of bullet points on both pages. All of them are equally important and equally influential on foreign exchange risks to the business. So the thing that we're looking at from an external point of view is the economic activities globally and how those are impacting currencies, liquidity, trade volumes. I mean, if we get to August, there are typical scenarios that play out when the junior people are left on the desks, the senior people have gone on holiday, there's less liquidity, less activity, and invariably some more risk-averse behaviors occurring in the interbank market. And that then impacts the corporates, and the corporates are having to operate in that space. And if you're looking at the southern hemisphere, it's normal business as usual, whereas in the northern hemisphere, a lot of people are on holiday. So you get pre-season knee jerks, post-season knee jerks. We see I know there's a couple of people here from South Africa. You will see that in the run-up to the Christmas season and the reopening in the January season, seeing the same kind of issues that are impacting local currency, but equally currency pairs. You've got politics, you've got business activity, you've got trade, you've got Brexit type of things, you've got trade wars, you've got all sorts of international activities over which you've got no control that are impacting the currency market at all times. You have within that market, who are the players? So you've got these big interbank players that you're not going to see, not going to be anything that you have contact with, but they are influencing the providers that you might be working with. It will be also impacting within the market, there will be the degrees of players that have got different degrees of maturity. And then within that, you have got different products and the regulatory environment around those different products. In different countries, we have got different regulations, some markets being more open, some markets being more closed, some being less liquid, some being more controlled, some having key players that seem to own spaces. So in all the different countries we work with, there are varying degrees of how you operate in that environment. What is the way we do business in that place? Liquidity will be different. The trends of where the currency is going. So if you look at purchasing power parity, which is your 10-year moving average as to where the currencies are going, and understanding how are we trending relative to that in a short-term window. And also the things that each company looks at differently is the cross rate that they need to look at. Are they looking at Rand Euro, or are they looking at Sterling Euro, or are we going Sterling Dollar or Dollar Euro? What are the currency pairs that a company is involved in? And most companies are involved in more than one. So it's home currency against your primary import-export currency, and then the extras that go in around that. And quite a few companies actually import and export. So they end up with things sort of crossing over. And when we talk about hedging, we'll talk about some of the potential risks in that space. So you've got all these internal activities that are going on, and you've got these external, and these two merge together, overlap one another, and leave the finance person, specifically business owner in the company, with a profit or loss in the bottom line. And they have it's a minefield to manage. One, because of time and availability and focus, and the other one is because of knowledge. So the things that are important to be considered by an organization in developing their strategies. And I'm going to use as a listing the kinds of strategies we see when we meet a customer for the first time. No cover at all. So in other words, spot rate, I don't care. I don't manage whether I count this way or I cost this way or I pay this way. I just go to my bank and ask them to deal with it. Then you have another strategy that companies come with, which is fully hedged, no risk. I've got no appetite for this. I do not want this to have any opportunity to bite me. So I cover everything. Problem you have there is what is everything? And that is not even a known factor, and a company that has put that in as a policy may well not know what fully covered means. So we always have to challenge that to understand actually how fully covered are they really. And the problem you've got with that and with no cover at all is they're either ends of a given spectrum. So if I'm not covering at all, I'm at risk of the spot rate moving at the moment and the way my accounting is going. And if I'm fully covered, I'm equally at risk of opportunity loss and the way I might be accounting, and I might be creating risk in that side. We also come across examples where companies actually cover their imports and don't cover their exports, or vice versa. In other words, doing 100% of one thing, 100% of the opposite thing on the two different flows of movement, the opposite movements. In other words, doubling their risk in most cases, not negating it completely. The part that companies often miss is that a continuum we looked at a moment ago as to where is the risk window. How long is it? How deep is it? How impactful is it at different times of the year? And that often gets ignored in the process of trying to dumb down a process so that there is protection against risk. What creates the problem? Partly is trying to get a policy in place, getting it followed, getting it recorded, getting it implemented. There are so many places where this can delay 5 minutes and create more risk than having not had a defined policy. Some companies will say you will create a policy that you hedge at the point of risk. So is that insurance risk transfer? Is that ownership risk transfer? Is that raising it in the accounting system? Where is that point? And having clarity on that and then following it. The risk you get is the individual in the department in that chain somewhere is on leave, is off sick unexpectedly, and all of a sudden you've got a 24-hour window that appears where the policy has not been followed. And it's those areas that open up risk. And most of the areas where we assess the application of policy or the validity of policy, or just going in and seeing what is being done so we can flow map it to understand what is the current situation, is the degree of area of not understanding how process can create as much risk as trying to contain the process. So we've always said you've got to be very realistic about both sides of this equation. Natural hedging is another one that is used quite often. I import dollars, I export dollars, but the risks that you get there is time and interest rate. So the timing might be that I get them in now and I pay them out 2 or 3 months later. I've got 3 accounting periods. I've got 3 periods of unrealized risk arising or even realized risk arising in between. So I don't have a natural hedge at all. I also have the circumstance that the payment out is required before the incoming funds flow. I'm again not protected. So natural hedging is definitely part of portfolio management, but it's not a defined policy to be that is natural at protecting you as an organization. So what kind of issues are facing management at this point in their lives, running a business where foreign exchange is, let's say, for example, 50% of their turnover is in foreign currency, and therefore, potentially, from our experience, 3% of that value could be impacting the net profit of the organization. So that is quite a substantial amount when you say 50% of the value of 50% of your turnover. So 3% of 50% of your turnover can be impacting your bottom line at any moment in time. So it is critical. It does impact the business. It is a real risk to organizations and how they manage it. And they're therefore very important in sort of larger size businesses for the board to be in ownership of understanding this. Smaller businesses, we're talking about the management. So the first things we talked about is the timing of getting things into your risk knowledge, into your risk window, recording information such that you know about things, starting with the budget and getting through to sales and the flows of information. And then it's looking at the different moving parts. How many times do organizations plan for something? A tsunami occurs outside of Japan and their goods are shipped 3 months late. We end up with COVID, things don't travel as we expected around the world, and I'm dealing with lumpy movement of my stock instead of the smooth flow that I had planned. And a lot of companies say to me, I don't hedge because I don't know when things are going to happen. You're never going to know when things are going to happen until they've happened. It's a bit like a Mandela statement. He made a comment that people think things can't be done until they are. Well, this is very much the same as that. You're never going to know exactly when it is, and you're never going to know the exact day that a person is going to put that piece of paper to the top of their pile and deal with it. You'll never know that in advance. So foreign exchange management has to be managed as an overlay strategy, not a married to a piece of paper strategy. Otherwise, you're going to cost your company even more money than you already are or are already doing, whichever it happens to be. So we try and divorce the two, but keep them 100% aligned in terms of risk management and allow timing and interest rate management to manage the time variances in a cost-effective manner. The other thing that's important is who makes decisions, when do they make decisions, how do they make decisions, what prompts them to make decisions, and how does a busy person find those triggers to activate them such that they get actions done within the business? How many times as you're on your way to work, you hear what the foreign exchange market's done, you've got a post-Brexit environment, the sterling's just fallen out of bed, you think, I better do X with that when I get to the office. Either you're in panic mode because it's too late, or you're in profit mode and you need to realize that opportunity and bank it. And you're on the way home, you think, oh, busy day. All this Brexit activity occupied everything else, and I never did anything. That is so common in foreign exchange management. The other aspect is it's delegated down the line, and a piece of paper didn't cross a person's desk today on my high movement day. So nothing got done today because a piece of paper didn't generate any activity. And those are your two ends of the spectrum that tends to happen. So companies come up with a policy of we're totally hedged, we're totally unhedged. and we've got all these risks that keep arising all the time. So avoiding them doesn't manage them either. So where do those foreign exchange risks come from? How do they arise? So the spot rate is the most common one, and that is the one that is volatile by the second. It's moving all the time. And it is built into other instruments that then might be taken to hedge something that is not today, it's on another date. And those might be standard vanilla instruments. You could also look at some structured instruments where you've built in an element of engagement of movement in the market, a bit of risk absorption by yourself, allowing you some aspect of getting out of it if certain conditions happen, or getting into it if certain conditions happen, or having a static rate over a period of a window. All these kind of instruments do exist in over and above the vanilla markets, and to be used to varying degrees of benefit to the organization, and in many cases to a high degree of added cost. So we always say be careful of anything beyond the vanilla, and rather use risk management strategies to create the flexibility rather than structured instruments. That is a generalist comment. There are definitely places where structured instruments bring a value, but they are more in the not the run of the mill of the business. It's usually in something that's slightly on the side, the tail of the bell curve. The other thing that creates a risk is where physical movement of money is occurring. Either that's happening in the foreign currency or it's happening in your local currency. And it can be due to payments and receipts occurring, so due to the business activities, or it could be happening because of your hedging instrument maturity windows and profile. So the maturities are creating that kind of risk. The other one is who owns the instrument that you have purchased and how they are going to trade it as it comes up from during its life and its maturity. And then if you're looking at the instrument and you're not taking delivery of it at that moment in time, its extension and therefore its impact on cash flow, depending on who the provider is and the way they're able to price the instrument for you, can have a major impact on what's going through your bank account. And another aspect is what's going through your credit limit on your facility. And the third area is any mark-to-market variations that they might be asking for, depending on how the instrument's been handled. So you also then have the provider's behavior. It's their efficiency, it's their back office, it's their engagement style, how approachable are they, how on the telephone are they, how on the platform are they, what kind of management information can they give you, how accessible are they 24/7, what is the knowledge of the people you're having to deal with. And then you've got the things like credit lines, credit facilities, risk responses, compliance responses, and how do you deal with your overlaying national regulatory requirements amongst with anti-money laundering, GDPR, and everything else that might be happening at other regulatory levels. So what we are coming down to is the requirement for focus. So if we have focus, what should we be looking at? So trying to bring what is probably a frightening list of, oh my goodness, where do I start? Let's try and hone that down, filter it down to where do we start? So attention needs to be, if I look back, how do companies operate at the moment? What are the things that they do look after? They will look after their local RAND treasury management. They'll invariably have good expertise there. They might even be outsourcing that. And they'll be ensuring that they're getting the best interest rate management in local currency. Quite often well run by many organizations. You might have a very good relationship with a legal firm. You might be a retainer. But when you have a legal query, the first thing you do is you pick up the phone and you get expert advice. If you're looking at management complexities, you've got a year end coming up and you're not sure, the first person you do is you pick up the phone your auditor, your accountant, your management accountant, some specialist, and you ask for advice as to how to handle this, and your ego doesn't get dented in the process. You're very pleased that you have a consultant of this caliber that you can turn to for advice and do the right thing, regulatory and by the business. So you've got all these parts of the business where advice is naturally looked for. And yet in foreign exchange, this is not something that is naturally questioned or looked for expertise. And yet the one area that through any aspect of tertiary education, at least all secondary education, No one's told you about it. It's one of these universities of life things. It very seldom appears in any curriculum to any degree of value. And yet people don't turn to outsiders for advice, which is an anomaly I don't totally understand. But what people tend to do then is to put policy and process on top of it and bring it down into the organization, assuming they can't control it, and therefore putting it into a process channel rather than doing what is right by the business at the same time. So you end up then with limited knowledge within the management of the company. You have an audit environment that's very standardized in the way they will approach things. And you're ending up not knowing why you got a loss or why you got a profit for all the things I have covered. So part of trying to manage that is management information. And if you don't have management information, you're not going to win this battle. So management information can be in whatever is important, whatever is right by you. What is it that you need to put in there so that you get information that delivers the focus and prompts the triggers so that you take action when you need to do that. So it needs to be proactive in some element, because we know as human beings we get distracted doing what we're there to do in the first place, which is to run the company that we're running. So it needs to be accurate, it needs to be timely, and it needs to be delivered to the right people in a way that it can be assimilated by those individuals. So what I would send to a debtors clerk, what I might send to a financial controller, and what I might send to an audit committee is going to be different. So it has to be relevant to whoever the recipient is. And where you need proactivity in response to it, how do you get those triggers to activate so that things happen? In the process of things happening, that's great. We do stuff, we deliver the activity that is required. Another major risk is that the information is in the heads of a lot of people, it's not recorded, or it's recorded late in a non-timely manner. And we see with a lot of organizations that are groups, and you've got information occurring in different subsidiaries in different ways, the loss of, or the degradation of the quality of information is very rapid. And it happens so easily when information is not recorded in a very strict, compliant way. For example, we run systems that doesn't matter how late it is. Information is documented every day, it is audited every day, and new information is presented literally live all the time. And no company can implement that kind of set of strictures because it's too expensive and it's not fit for purpose. So where do you find between nothing and something that is very rigid and oriented such that you get the best management information? The big thing that is important in this is, so what? So what do I do? And that's down to accountability. How do we now close the loop on a regular basis, relevant to the business's needs, to review what is going on, determine feedback loops of learned information, understanding what is happening, repositioning your risk strategy at a moment in time, looking at alternative solutions to information, to decision-making processes, to picking up on where we've made mistakes, learned, and plug the gaps. And where does the challenge come from? From those that are not involved in the finance aspect of it, particularly the financial recording of it. And you're looking then at either purchases or sales, risk committee, audit committee, the board, the CEO. Yeah, where is the challenge coming from? That you are thinking about things correctly and you're addressing all the assumptions you need to be able to be running your foreign exchange in an effective manner. So these are just some examples of dashboard information. This is a dashboard view. Yeah, what have been my volumes? How much has it been? What currencies has it been in? You know, what mix of instrument activity have I used? What kind of currency pairs have I worked in? Where's been the relative volumes? Yeah, how much of it is historic? How much is in the future? This all needs to be tailored for what you as a business need now. Why do you need it? Who needs it? And what they're going to do with it, as we talked about earlier. So here's an example of a group of companies with consolidated management information around the foreign exchange for the group in multiple currency pairs. You then have the working documents. This is where I'm not using it as a decision-making tool. I'm using it as a working decision-making tool. Here's my detailed information. What am I going to do today? what's coming up on my radar, how am I going to manage it on a day-to-day basis? What are the things that are proactively telling me I have to take attention of today? You could also use that for other forms of risk management and graph generation to go to your respective recipients. So Excel becomes part of your output mechanism under certain circumstances, depending on systems that you have. You then also go back to looking at information that drives the proactive decision making, and that comes from two sources. Where's the market today? Where's my information today? And the clashing of those two pieces of information tell me I need to do something. So internally, we would look, for example, at what are the hedge positions that I've got, what are the exposures I've got, and therefore what is my under over covered per period bucket, per currency pair bucket, and therefore what am I going to do about that now? And if you look, for example, you can see in the grayed out part on the right hand side, the very bottom one is showing quite a large light colored area, whereas the one that is highlighted got a very small covered area. So relatively speaking, I can quickly see the ratio of relevant over or under covered I've got in every currency pair in my group of companies at this moment in time, netting my imports and my exports together. And I've now isolated out the export element. So I can look at it in so many windows. So the importance for the company is, how do you want to look at it? Why are you going to look at it that way? What are the drivers of that decision? And now what am I going to do about it? And is it relevant to give me the right information in return? So those are the kinds of examples, very high level, guys. I am speeding over the top of it in that aspect. So penultimate slide before I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask me some questions is just trying to pull together what I've covered in the last 45 minutes. And my first tip is don't over-engineer it. I've probably frightened you totally in terms of all the things that need to be considered. But what I'm saying is make it relevant to your company. So some companies are going to have some very simple Excel solutions. Other companies are going to say, I can't do it on Excel. I need something far more robust. I can do it with one person because I'm the CEO, sole proprietor, and I can do it and I've got time. I question that. And then you've got the other end where you've got a FTSE 100 company with a fully operating treasury with all the software technology, expertise, know-how, and people. There's your continuum. Where do you fit in that? And making it relevant to that space you are in, and relevant in terms of what you're doing and the decision-making prompts that come out of it, but equally cost. Cost is absolutely important. Don't spend money you don't need to spend in the space. Make sure it is correct. The important part of what I've covered with you today is don't miss the facts. Know what the facts are. Make sure that you've got the right information, you get it at the right time, and that it is used by the organization to deliver the solution. So the importance is the fact. The other one is to make sure that you've got the focus on it and the ability to respond to the triggers. So there needs to be the proactive triggers coming to you. And that is part of your information delivery system. Then it's the actions of capturing everything that you're doing. And it's important also to analyze what you've got. I mean, we will look in our business and we'll say, well, what are my options? There might be 6 options every day to something we're doing for client A today. We're doing something for them tomorrow or next week. And we review it from scratch every single day and say, what are our options today? And they are always, almost always, I would say 99% of the time, you have options. Now, is this an accounting positive option? Is this a business positive option? Is this the simplest thing to do? Is this the most cash friendly thing to do? Is this the one that's going to have the least impact on the credit line? Is this the one that actually is going to make sure that I don't end up with the year-end challenge because it's tomorrow, or actually sets me up most appropriately for year-end management? So I've got accounting decisions, I've got business decisions, I've got cash flow decisions, I've got credit decisions, and I'm looking at my portfolio with all that information at the same time. Every day we look at a client's portfolio. Where are the seasons? How long is this exposure? How would this instrument be used? There is so much to consider. So we will do that all the time. Obviously, if you look at each business, it might be simpler in context, but do consider what your options are and how you take decisions. And one of the things when we discuss and share this with audit committees is in the policy, ensure one of the things that the policy insists on is you document your decision. Document what your options were, what your assumptions were, what were the key issues that you took into consideration, and what was the decision you made. Because in Forex, in hindsight, that decision will always be wrong at some point in time. You'll look back and say, if only I had not, or somebody accuses you of, should not have. And it's very important to have that very accurate audit trail of what you've done and why you've done it and what was the outcome. And you, with hindsight, you say, what was the unintended outcome? What was the opportunity missed? So that you can learn and improve from those questionings and challenges that might be coming from those that are not involved in the rock face of doing it. So it's important to have accountability. And the things I've talked about now are having accountability, but also having the review of accountability. I have done a marathon in 49 minutes. You're welcome to all please turn your cameras on and make me sure that you are still there and I'm not sitting there looking at nobody. Alan, it's lovely to see one human face there and mine. Be lovely to bring some cameras on to ask me some questions. I've put up there because this is quite a wide area we've covered at a very high level in a very short period of time. So not to be bamboozled by science, as some people might be, I've put some ideas of questions up there. If anybody wants me to specifically pick on one of those because they're important to them, please pick a question. And if you can and you want to, please ask a totally relevant question to your business that you'd like to pose. Over to the floor if anyone would like to ask a question. If not, I will potentially pick one of mine, but I would rather somebody ask.
Sharon,
yes.
May I ask, is there a limit to the size of the business that you would take on? Or is there a point that companies kind of get to where they think that, what is sort of the ballpark figure before companies think, okay, need to do something about this now?
I think that is a very nice question, June. Thank you for coming up with that. The importance is how relevant it is to the company. If the company is turning over $1 million and they've got that full $1 million or 80% of that is imports, it is very relevant to that company, irrespective of the fact that they are tiny. And a big company, obviously, it answers the question directly. The point at which Valufin or Constançon Currencies, as an independent consultant, would take that on is we have a minimum fee of £350 a month. And if the company then does a cost-benefit analysis and says, if I'm going to save 2.5%, 3% of my million to the bottom line, is that going to cost more or less than £350 a year? So, and if it still costs me money, it costs me money, but it's costing me more now. So a company might turn around and say, this process being used by some of my staff time is costing me far more than the 350. So the 350 is actually saving before I even look at the Forex output limit. So this is really a business decision that they have to make. Our point is we have a minimum.
Yeah.
And if you're prepared to pay our minimum, we don't mind how small you are because it's important to you.
Yeah.
We tend to do very limited amounts of individuals because the regulatory aspects are different, and the ability to be able to do management for an individual is limited because they invariably have single transactions. It's not something we can manage and add value. We can just add process value. But if a person says to me, but that process value is worth spending £350 a month to do my process value, then we'll take on individuals. So it's not our first focus because the value add has a different compiling of the value comes from lesser sectors of what we do. Does that get to?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sharon, it's Jenny. Sorry, you won't see me because my cat's sitting in front of the screen, so I'll have to move him and I've got to unplug myself if I do that. So it's just there are a couple of questions in the chat thing. I don't know if you want to just refer to there.
I will get to those. Yep, no problem. Thank you.
That was just what I wanted to say. Just alert.
Sharon, it's Rob.
Yes, Rob.
You mentioned that if you've got a natural hedge, you buy in a currency and selling in a currency.
Yep.
Is it I think this is what you mentioned, and I wasn't quite sure. Is it that your only risk really is the timing of payments and receipts?
It's timing from two elements, Rob. One of the timings is accounting. I've got a month end in between, I've got a year end in between. So I have an accounting timing risk. The other one, I have a physical cash flow timing risk, which might impact credit, it might impact liquidity, it might impact revaluations. I'm coming back then to the accounting aspect of it. So I'm not sure if that two-pronged element answer gives you what you needed. So you don't always have a natural hedge because of those two primary things, the accounting timing and the physical cash flow timing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So and it's 90% of the issue actually is the accounting aspect of it. That is primary, what unhinges natural hedges.
But again, that's a timing issue because you've got an intervention in between of a year end or a month end or a quarter end.
So, and the other aspect for any of those accountants in here who want to just understand another area of depth, which this presentation so far has not done. Let's say, for example, your data came in 3 months ago, and let's say we're looking at sterling dollar. 3 months ago, we were at 132, for example, and my data came in at 132. Now, my creditor is a just-in-time kind of project, and it only came in a week ago at the current month's rates, and that's sitting at 139. So I've got a source accounting risk, not only the receipt and payment of the flows risk. So I have a risk arising for 3 months while my creditor was in place, my debtor wasn't. So I'm revaluing it there as well. So I'm not only revaluing the Forex element, I'm revaluing the underlying Forex arising element in my accounting system.
Yeah, and that back to the timing. Yep, that answers it. Thank you.
Okay. Then while anybody who wants to ask a question live, by all means, just put a orange hand up and I will come to you, or turn on your camera and I'll see you. But in the meantime, I'm going to look at some of the questions we have got here. What elements within a foreign exchange transaction could remit outsourcing the service? Okay, I'll interpret that. What compliance and taxes would one have to adhere to and has a mandate to invest money held in foreign currency at the SARB? Okay, Colin, I'm going to try and understand what those questions are. But the first element there you're saying is, what aspects of my foreign exchange activity can I outsource to a third party, either legally or practically, is the way I'm going to interpret that. If I'm hopeless to be wrong, please by all means, Colin, if you're still with us, yes you are, put your hand up and rephrase my question for me. But if you're saying what are the elements that you can outsource? Obviously. Yeah, so Colin, okay, I'm going to continue. So what, it depends on who you choose as a provider and what you need. So you might say, I'm only going to outsource the negotiation of a rate. I'm only going to outsource the recording of the information. I'm only going to outsource putting in an annual audit. You know, there's 3 examples of what you might choose to outsource. And then you've got the situation of who do I outsource it to? I've got a provider that does just rate negotiation with rate jockey type of outsourced provider. I might outsource to somebody who is actually the currency provider rather than an independent. I could be outsourcing it to somebody who is just a data capture organization only. Or you might have it to somebody who offers a more holistic foreign exchange treasury service. So if you look at what we do, we can do the entire treasury department, where some people can do elements of the treasury department. And one of the questions I will always ask you to challenge on your choice of provider is the degree of independence that provider is giving you in the services that they're offering you in return. Because if they're not 100% independent, you've got a whole bunch of challenges that you need to put on steroids to ensure that you're getting the right outcome. Second part of your question is compliance and taxes. So if you're looking at compliance in the South African environment, there are requirements around how long you could hold funds. So, Rob, just to add to your question of natural hedging, sometimes the regulations get in the way of natural hedging because they only allow you to hold the currency on hand in foreign currency for 30 days, for example. Some will allow 120 days, some will allow a full year. So it depends on the regulatory allowance that the currency can stay in foreign currency that will drive your ability to use natural hedging as well. So here you're looking at the management of a regulatory overlay onto your decision-making processes. If you're looking at taxes, and I'm not quite sure whether you're talking about something that might be the taxes that you are paying, import duties, export duties, those kind of taxes. I don't know, Colin, if you want to specifically give me an idea of what kind of taxes you were talking about. But one of the things we always have to take into account, whether you are the treasury manager, external or internal, or whatever role you're having in doing the treasury, is what are your regulatory controls that you have in that environment, and related to that, what are your liquidity controls. So, for example, we work with another market in Africa where the credit risk is so vastly different to the credit risk in the UK and the credit risk in South Africa, where funds flow at the same time. So within a trading window of today, funds go in and out, therefore removing, other than for a couple of hours, counterparty risk. If you're looking at certain other markets, the one leg will transfer today, the other leg will transfer 3 days later. And that creates a very different risk element for the counterparties, but equally the company dealing with those two counterparties, because there's two elements as to where the money's gone in and out. So I don't know, Colin, if you want to, you are unmuted a moment ago. Would you like to just add to your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Colin, perfectly.
Sorry, there's a problem with my signal here. It keeps cutting. I don't know what's wrong, but
you're in South Africa. Eskom and Telkom are having a go at you.
Well, you did actually answer the questions correctly for me.
Okay, wonderful, Colin.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Another one, what are warning signs that an element of management or treasury executive management have within the business that something incorrect is developing in foreign exchange? One is high numbers appearing in the realized position, high numbers relative to the business appearing in the unrealized, quality of management information, quality of challenge that is occurring of the business internally, having lots of people in the chain of activities, not looking at a centralized view of the business. I could probably start from the beginning, Alan. There's a lot more I could add to, but what I'll do is I'll just take Claude's question and then maybe come back to it, and you may wish to ask me either on the chat or specifically an area that my solution. Okay, I've given you the answer. That's good. Sure. You've got your hand up. Would you like to unmute and share with us your question?
Yes. Thank you so much, Sharon, for the presentation. I think a lot of it is quite high level for me. I'm in a non-profit, and we've just managed to accumulate sort of a decent sum of US dollars. And I just wanted advice on how would this is not our usual activity.
Right.
It's just because of the COVID regulations. With my executive, how would we manage trying to maximize the value of that US dollar, those US dollars that we have,
right,
without risking losing all the value because we held on to it in hopes of worse dollar days in South African terms.
Yeah, worse currency days. If you look at what last year did to the rand, and I'm taking it against the dollar, which is the question you've asked. I mean, we saw a range last year of 14 and a half, right up to just short of 1950. I think we saw as the high, which is when you should have done everything. But of course, you probably didn't even have it then. And then we're back down now to sort of ranging between the 1450 and the 1580 is sort of the range we've seen for the last quarter. So the South African currency is a volatile currency. It is not as liquid as some of the markets. It is prompted by a lot of political and emerging market interventions that will impact. The external factors are very high on the rand. So never assume it's going to go in your way. And the other aspect is never assume one decision is right. So what I would look at, Chloe, is having a look at your time frame that regulation or business liquidity requirements give you the window of how long have you got to convert it. I've got a week or I've got 3 months. When do I have to have it in rands? The other question is what currency range window is palatable to you, and how does that range to where the rand spot rate is now? And then put in a multiple layered decision points and say, okay, if it gets to a 10% improvement on where I am now, I will take 5% of the volume. If I see 15%, I'll take another 10%. And so you work the answer that on average, you are happy, and you've made multiple decisions which allow you to change the future undelivered decisions because of what is happening, and you can reevaluate your decision points. But you haven't said, I've seen 5% improvement, I've done everything, oh, I'm greatly happy. And you look back 5 minutes later and think, oh, look at the currency's gone now. That was the wrong decision. Forex will always have a wrong decision element. So you never make one decision, and you make many decisions, and you reevaluate your decision points all the time. And that you can do yourself, or you can outsource something like that to a third party. So you can even to a degree outsource that to your bank. But I wouldn't do it without not remaining in touch. So you've got 3 ways of doing it: yourself, a service provider, or an independent provider like ourselves. So you've got 3 ways in which you can manage that.
Thank you so much. It feels adequately engineered for what I need to do.
We have run over time. Any of the burning questions that are sitting either on the last page or sitting inside your head, please, by all means, on the last slide is our email address. Either through there or through LinkedIn, drop us any questions. Happy to answer them at any point in time, and look to see if there's a way in which we can give you advice. We don't have to give you a solution. We can give you advice, and you can get on and deliver it yourself, or find any engineering, as I suggested to Claude, is you can do things yourself. You can partly outsource certain things, or you can come to someone like ourselves, which is a more global message. And the request on the chat line is, are these slides going to be available? Step more than that, Claude and the rest of you, is the slides will be available as a standalone document, but equally a recording of the session will be made available to all of you as well. So you'll be able to look at the slides are quite flat. They always are. Slides are physically flat, so is PowerPoint, but the conversation around it is where you get the depth and the learning and the understanding, and that will be available too. At that, I will probably say thank you very much for the time I spent with you. This is a new series we're starting, and it'll be interesting if I could get feedback from any of you on whichever platform you want, either in the chat now, and I'll leave it open for a few seconds, or via email, or phoning us, or on LinkedIn. Are there topics within the detail of foreign exchange you'd like to know more about? Because this topic is vast, and we have done a gallop at high speed. No, actually, we've broken the speed of sound in the process of what we've tried to cover in a single 1-hour session. So what we'd be looking at is saying, what makes most sense to you? What would you like us to talk about? And we can do some tailored sessions going forward over the months ahead. I'm done. Any questions? I'll give you a minute, but if not, you're all welcome to drop off. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.